Hey, it's Chris, and I will be your Monday morning Hotness quarterback today. Let's take a look at what is new, what's trending, what you should know, especially focused from the Board Game Geek Hotness list, and why it's on there in the first place. Now, I'll try, as this is somewhat of a rotating basis, not to cover games that are repeatedly on the Hotness, so you don't hear me say the same thing every time or every week or two when I do this. But if there's anything slightly different or slightly new that's been on there since last time, I'll definitely give it a shout and make it brief so that everyone knows what's going on. Let's take a look. So first up on the hot list, at the top of the hotness this week is Great Western Trail. Now, you may know it from being in the Board Game Geek top 10 rated overall, 11th thematic, but what you need to know is that Eaglespiel and Feister are coming out with a new 2.0 version in late summer 2021. Following summer, not only do we get a 2.0 version of this game, they are making it into a trilogy. So in summer 2022, you are getting the Argentinian version, and then in summer 23, you're going to be visiting New Zealand and the hobbits. Well, at least I hope they have hobbits. Wouldn't that be amazing? Instead of cattle, you have hobbits. And anyway, I'm easily distracted, sorry. But anyway, so Feister is going to get his money worth out of this series and this flagship. It's taking what you love about Great Western Trail, deck building, rondel, but they say they're also going to be adding something new and interesting, whatever that may be. I think people who like this game originally are going to go, okay, how much of this game is going to get tweaked? And is it going to take the things I like and I love in the first place? And is it going to make them better? Or is it going to necessarily change a good thing? Because that's the risk you take when you're taking a change to a game that is already thought of as one of the best Euro-style games in that sense. One, what is going to be new about the new version? And then two, how are these going to be different enough that it warrants an Argentina version as well as a New Zealand version? And unfortunately, as you can see in the box art, they clearly did not take my suggestion or my thought pattern of going with hobbits. It looks like you're going to get more sheep instead, so that's unfortunate. As someone who is not a huge fan of the game, this does nothing for me, but I know that the forums are abuzz over what it's going to be. To steal the joke from someone on Reddit, I'm going to wait for the Golem version, because it's also coming from Plan B Games. Anyway, it's okay. I make bad jokes all the time. I am a dad. So, that is why Great Western Trail is on the hotness. That's what you need to know, and that's what you need to be preparing your wallet for if you're interested. But thankfully, they're not putting them out in short span, so you have a year in between the games as well. That's also why I've seen a couple, or more than a couple, pop up on the collection side of things for sale on Facebook groups. So in case you're seeing it there too, that's the reason. So next up on the hotness, if you're not familiar with Scott Almes and the Tiny Epic series, well, you are now. So this is the latest iteration of the Tiny Epic series. This is Tiny Epic Dungeons. I just talked about it this past weekend in my upcoming Kickstarter videos because it's launching on February 23. Now, this is one of those campaigns where there was not a whole lot of pre-hype. There was not a whole lot of pre-announcement in terms of length of time between when it was announced and when it's launching. We'll see what happens. These games routinely fund in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, this one is a little bit interesting because the whole premise of these games is based around the small-ish box and the small-ish space that they take up in the first place. But they have already said that this is going to be 28 millimeter miniatures to go along with this. So how is that going to fit in with the series, and how much of a departure is it going to be? There's going to be two phases, sort of the beginning phase and the boss phase, where you also have to defeat this end boss, but you can't deal him damage directly. You need to take him to special ritual rooms, where then you can defeat him or damage him in the ritual rooms. You're going to be finding gear that is part of sets that you can use to upgrade your heroes. What else are they going to add? You know that there are going to be a lot of stretch goals, usually with a significant portion of exclusives. And then the question just is, how much other stuff gets added on, and does this change the approach, especially with the lower price level that this often is, where you can get the base game for between $25 and $35, maybe with an expansion for $50? Is this going to ratchet things up a notch and maybe start it at $50 and then make the total price over $100 when they have the inevitable expansions or deluxeifications that they will often do in these campaigns? Who knows? If you're a fan of this, it's worth checking out. As a personal note, I don't typically find myself having a lot of enjoyment out of them because I feel like they're halfway in between. If I want to play something that's more fillerish, I have more dedicated games that work well, especially at a 2-player count with my wife for that side of things. And if I want the full dungeon crawl, if I want the full Euro game, if I want the full whatever, I would rather play the full whatever. So it'll be interesting to see how much of this meshes in that sense and just where it falls on the spectrum of things. But like I said, launching on the 23rd, so you can check it out for yourself when it goes live. Next up, talked about this past week, Stroganov. It just launched on Kickstarter as the biggest and the most notable Euro game that is launched in February, as opposed to Carnegie, as well as Darwin's Journey in January. So you can see the aesthetic has sort of this 19th century Russia feel, and that's what they're going for because you are Cossacks journeying out into the realms of Siberia, trying to further your trading posts and gather resources and collect story points in terms of who has the best story and who has the best collection of adventures, essentially, to be the one when the winter strikes that you come home and are the biggest tale teller. Obviously, it's more complicated than that, but it's launched on Kickstarter. It's doing quite well. It's 3 to 4 times its funding goal currently. They're hitting some stretch goals. So that's why you're seeing it pop up in the Hotness. It's definitely worth checking out if you are more of a Euro fan. As a non-Euro person, having read the rule books for several of the biggest Euros already that have launched in 2021, I think it's the most easily accessible Euro. But again, that doesn't probably mean much if you are a Euro person, because for me, I find that this one has a little bit less overhead, a little bit less nuance in terms of so many nitpicky rules, where it is more streamlined in that sense without losing some of the multiple actions and the decisions that you have to make that many Euro gamers find so important in the first place. Now this next one, Hansa Teutonica, this is covering Hansa Teutonica as well as Hansa Teutonica the Big Box, because in case you missed it, anytime Shut Up and Sit Down does a video, things pop up on the hot list, and Quinn's put out a video talking about this game as a great Euro game. And I had the Big Box on my wish list for quite some time because it's not your typical more Euro style game. And so it's been of interest to me. So the Big Box version takes several expansions that were offered originally in addition to the base game in the past and lumps them all into one game. The other problem is the original game has been out of print and a little bit harder to get for some time. So when this was announced and then that this has hit retail, people have been picking it up because they could no longer get the previous edition. You are a trader, one of many, along the Hanseatic League, trying to develop your merchant ways and your merchant wares by building the best route that you can. And unlike a lot of other Euro games, it's highly interactive, it's highly tactical in terms of the placement, and that is why it has been more of an appeal to me. Play is quick, you only get 2 actions per turn to figure out what you're going to do, so there is not as much analysis paralysis, and there is not much downtime as well. It includes the Britannia as well as the East expansion that were originally additionally to the base game in the first place. In case you're wondering where else it stands too, besides just one random review from Shut Up and Sit Down, as powerful as they are, it was a 2010 Board Game Geek Game of the Year. It was also a 2010 Spiel recommended game. It did not win, but it was one of the recommended ones. So that tells you a little bit more as well, that the pedigree is there. It's not just some random review picked out of hundreds of Euro-style games that have come to light. This is a game that has been well thought of for quite some time. Period. It's on my list of things that I would actually be interested in as a Euro-style game. And there aren't many of those. El Grande, Concordia, and maybe this. And honestly, it's not that expensive. For a big box, for a game that was previously out of print, right now on Amazon, it's only selling for $42. So that's not expensive at all, considering what you're getting for the value. So if this has any interest, it's definitely worth checking out. I'm going to be checking it out. I'm probably going to be trying to trade for one of these 9 copies right now that people have marked for trade, so I can end up with a copy myself. Next up is Red Rising from Stonemaier Games. Didn't screw it up this time. I apologize to Jamey. But this is Red Rising, based off of the novel of the same accord. Gameplay is starting to come out soon. The Watch It Played video from Rodney just launched last week. I actually talked to Jamey via email, and he was gracious enough actually to offer me a couple review copies of a few other games from their catalog, which they are super generous about doing. Unfortunately, for my tastes, it was the Scythe modular board, I think Between Two Cities, the Tapestry expansion, and My Little Scythe with its expansion. And I emailed them back and I said, hey, thanks, but I know none of these are going to be a good fit for me, but I would love to be considered in the future, and I don't want to take a game away from someone else that would potentially get more enjoyment out of it. And he was super gracious about it, and I even, dared to ask him a couple questions about Red Rising in follow-up, and again, he was super gracious in getting back to me within 10 minutes of my email. So I know he has that reputation, and it showed in this interaction. He was gracious enough to answer my questions, and I just wanted to know, hey, of Red Rising, what is making it stand out compared to other games in a similar genre, and what is your favorite aspect of it? And he said flat out, my favorite part of this game is the hand management in order to try and get the best combo of cards that you can, especially when it comes to the end game scoring. So there's definitely some strategic element there in your management. And so I love hand management and combo building. So I was happy to see that. And the main thing he compares it to is the only other thing that he thinks is dramatically like it is Fantasy Realms, which he says he tried to base it a little bit off of. Now, if you're not familiar with Fantasy Realms, it is a relatively decently thought of game. Most of you may not even heard of this, but it's the 81st ranked family game, and it's actually in the Board Game Geek Top 500. That's how well it's actually thought of. And so it's a game from 2017 where you're trying to construct the best hand of this generic fantasy kingdom. And again, it takes the combos to the next level because it's just draw a card, discard a card, but you're allowed to draw cards from the discard pile, which sets it apart from other card drawing hand management style games. Now, the other thing he says sets Red Rising apart is that when you are discarding a card, like I mentioned in Fantasy Realms, you are activating the deploy ability. So you're not just getting rid of a card, you're getting rid of a card and getting a benefit. And he says not only is that important about which card you're doing it, it's then obviously when are you discarding it to get that ability, and then also where, because there is different locations that you can discard it to. So I don't know. I saw some of the comments on the Reddit in reaction to the Watch It Played video, but this is a game that I don't think an instructional video is going to be necessarily as helpful for me personally. I want to see a gameplay video of the game actually being played. And so for me, that's what's going to be a make it or break it, because I like this style of game. I like hand management, I like combos, I like set collection. And so for me, I want to see it firsthand before I make any judgment either way. So I'm still excited. I'm just tempered as well because I just know sometimes my taste doesn't agree with everyone else's. So next up, Terraforming Mars, the Ares Expedition. I talked about this last week after it launched on Kickstarter. It is the card version equivalent, the more streamlined version of Terraforming Mars, the #2 game on Board Game Geek, essentially. And it takes it and it removes some elements, it streamlines some elements, it makes some elements completely gone. It just changes things without trying to change things too much. The comparison is it's a Roll for the Galaxy type game where you've got 5 separate phases of cards that you can be playing and benefits that you can be getting. They take away the center board in the sense that you are terraforming on it and that there are oceans on there that you are just randomly flipping when you would terraform an ocean in the first place and getting a random benefit. You are still getting the other 3 main ways of scoring, but some of the resources have changed. Energy is gone completely. Titanium and steel are now used just at a discount. And then you are trying to then use your cards to the maximum of their ability. Already several $100,000 on Kickstarter. The price is $39. The question in, I think, a lot of people's minds is, especially if you did not pick up the big box on Kickstarter previously with the 3D tiles, you have to basically get all in right now to get it. And that is not necessarily something I think people wanted to do. I think ideally you would have been able to piecemeal some of the pieces from the other parts of Terraforming Mars. Say if you don't have more than, say, the base game or 1 expansion, it's not really able to do that, and I think that's the big downside. The other thing is people are somewhat, back and forth about this. Is this going to be a good entry point if you have not played Terraforming Mars? Is this going to be too different if you like Terraforming Mars in the first place? Or is this going to be too much of a simplified Terraforming Mars if you really liked it as well? I'm going to be passing. It's definitely, I'm just not a big fan of Terraforming Mars in general. I'm okay with that. I'm okay if you really love it, because what's important is you like what you like. So for me, There you go. For you, boom, there's what you need to know. Next up is After the Empire. Now, this is sort of creating a little bit of hotness because it has just recently begun delivering or in the process of being delivered to Kickstarter backers. This is a actually Kickstarter game that funded in September 2019 by Gray Fox Games. And as you can see, it's a worker placement tower defense similar to one of the other ones that just launched last week. So what do you need to know? 2 to 4 player game, customizing and defending your castle. The early reviews and the early thoughts on it are very positive. I mean, as with a lot of early Kickstarters before the broad market gets a hold of it, the rating is 8.3, which is really, really good. So we'll see what happens with it from there. But that's why it's on the hotness. You're seeing a lot of people want to pick it up in the secondary market after the hype is starting to build from the people who got it in the first place. But as well, there's not really a whole lot of review out there in the first place. There's no reviews in a text form. And the only review that's kind of out there right now currently is Tom Vasel's review from the Dice Tower. Now, the key thing to know, and maybe this is also why it's hitting the hotness, is on the Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel, he gives it the seal of excellence, which is usually, I think, like an 8.5 at least. I think maybe actually a 9 out of 10. So he compares it, and unlike the one that just launched on Kickstarter last week, where that one is more cooperative, this one is head-to-head. This one is competitive. So you each have your own individual castle. You each have individual enemies. You each have enemies attacking your castle, but how they're attacking your castle, on which side of your castle they're going to be attacking may be different. They may, as he says, attack my front. They may attack your flank. Same thing can be happening in different spots and still get a different result. And the interaction, he also states, is relatively minimal, but except for more of the worker placement where you're going out and trying to get resources and limited spots as you would expect with a crunchier, hate that word anyway, worker placement style game. So he really likes it. He thinks it's thematically very good, especially as a tower defense, especially as a worker placement. So if it interests you, it looks like you can at least pre-order at least a version of it through Miniature Market. I think there's a thread on the forums as well talking about if you can pick up a Kickstarter version. And as you can see on the Kickstarter page, the Kickstarter version has stretch goals. It also has a neoprene mat and the game trays. So are you going to be, and that was $85 it looks like for the base game here. And what are exclusives with Gray Fox? It looks like retail is going to be cubes, and you're getting the minis here. So for $20 less, $25 less, you're getting cubes instead of minis. And then looks like you've got some other markers here that are all done. Kickstarter exclusives, a little bit of secret objectives there. Basically, an additional set of a lot of the cards, it looks like. And then the retail just being all cubes. So that's the difference. So if you can live without having some of the upgraded components and maybe 1 or 2 or 3 cards slightly less, I'm not sure how much that would make a difference. But if you're interested, it looks like the retail version would be a pretty safe bet. You're just going to lose out on some of the deluxifications. So otherwise, try and find one on the secondary market too. Also on the hotness now, in case you missed it, about a week and a half ago-ish, maybe less, is they announced The Witcher, the old world board game based on the series The Witcher. Now, there's not a whole lot of information out about it currently, except for the fact that it is going to be on Kickstarter. It is going to be launching in May of 2021, date yet to be determined. It is going to be a competitive game where you are all Witchers trying to slay the most beasts, trying to get the most victory points in that way. They've shown a few models. These are the 2 models so far that they've shown, including the Witcher and one of the enemies. Now, they talk about it here where you're going to be traveling across some sort of map with quests, with various objectives that you can try to do, including killing these monsters that are going to choose the most points. Now they talk about other ways that you can do it, and you're going to be trying to get 4 to 6 trophies depending on what you're going for or what the end game conditions are. I'm assuming there's going to be some variability there, either based on game length, player count, or maybe some things give you more trophies than others, so trying to balance a certain number of one versus out the other. And then they talk about just using a unique deck of cards to each Witcher to combo to be able to get these objectives done in the first place. Apart from that, all we know is it's by CD Projekt Red and the launch date, in general speak. So I'm sure they're going to be, as I've seen on the Facebook, they've been slowly leaking out a little bit of information, every couple of days or every week or so. My guess is we'll slowly get more information. I think they're going to be trying to do some sort of tabletop simulator or something like that. I don't think anything is quite firm, but we'll see. And it's definitely one that's going to have a lot of hype behind it, especially with the Netflix series, especially with the previous Witcher board game, which was kind of not quite living up to people's expectations, but it was very nostalgic because of the series in the first place. and we'll see if it's going to be better, if it's going to be worse, what all it's going to include. It's definitely going to be pricier, even though the other one's out of print, because this one's going to have miniatures. So we'll see what it entails, and we'll see what ends up happening. Next we have On Mars, the Alien Invasion, a somewhat cooperative expansion. So in case you're not familiar, On Mars was a big Kickstarter back in 2019. Sounds like Space Odyssey. Back in 2019 on Kickstarter. It is a Lacerda game, so it's super, super heavy. Again, completely out of my wheelhouse. However, even during that campaign, they said that in the future there was going to be a cooperative expansion. And so for a while, it has just been under the cooperative expansion in Board Game Geek. And up until literally this week, that had been the assumption. Now, all of a sudden, out of the blue, Eagle Griffin Games announced that this is now going to be what it's called. And frankly speaking, this art is much more appealing. Now, I didn't realize until I just blew this up that the aliens are here, but I love the red color. I think if you took the one big alien here out of the center and just had the beams in the background and the one lurking in the shadows, that'd be sweet. Anyway, now they talk a little bit here about what you're going to expect, but unless you're familiar with the base game and unless you're familiar with what it may need or what it may want, and frankly speaking, I'm not, I can't really speak on whether or not that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing, but they talk about there's going to be 4 little separate chapters in this game that are going to allow for solo play, competitive play, cooperative play, but also one versus many? Like, I've never seen one versus many in a worker placement game, so I'm actually really intrigued just to see, for sheer curiosity's sake, what that actually is going to look like. So they say there's going to be little alien meeples. There's going to be little other dudes going around here. You got a little bit of a mech situation, an alien board, alien powers. Here you can get a little bit of the alien sideboard that's going to be present. And so it's basically asking, are you going to stop the alien invasion? Are you going to help the alien invasion? Are you just going to ignore the alien invasion altogether and just kind of do your own thing on Mars anyway? Now, the interesting thing down here at the bottom, they actually mention this, and this may be a turnoff for some people or not, depending on your group or your style of play. Chapter 1, the 1 versus all, like I mentioned, you have to have between 3 and 5 players, which, I mean, if you've played the 1v-alls in the Amerithrash games, well, you know that's the player count that you're going to need. The Outbreak, the co-op, obviously 2 to 4. The co-op Blackout, they say, again, 2 to 4. And the solo, well, you guessed it. So that's why it's on the... Now, the other problem was, prior to this name change, they really hadn't announced a date. It was just sometime nebulous in 2021. So with this, now they are going to announce that it is running May 13 to May 28. So a good 2-week campaign, and there you go. Everything you need to know will be presented at that point. I'm guessing you're going to have a lot of heavier type reviewers getting their hands on it before then, showing what it may develop or add on to the base game in the first place and what they think of it. There you go. That is what you need to know about On Mars Alien Invasion. Next up is Canvas. If you haven't heard about Canvas, a lot of people have really been raving about it, and it got a lot of critical acclaim when it was on Kickstarter towards April-ish of 2020. And so at the beginning of the year, last month in January, backers were getting their rewards. And what this game is you are in an art competition and you are trying to create the best combination, most creative picture on a canvas, as the name suggests, against your fellow painters. Now, it takes a little bit of a different route, and it uses sort of almost the transparent Mystic Veil type cards, where each of them has a portion of the painting on them, and you can layer them on top of the canvas to create an mishmash or an amalgam of those pictures all together. Each of these cards contains their own set of icons for scoring as well. And so you can see a little bit of what you're getting. You're getting your faux easels. You've got these scoring little icons down here at the bottom that you can see. So it's just as simple as these are the generic ones in the middle that you can buy depending on their location, a la something like Century Spice Road / Golem. The cost is going to be more prohibitive depending on which way you go on the board. You have to have enough inspiration to buy it as well. And when you have 3 of a kind, you can layer them, as I mentioned, and create an artwork and score them based on the little tabs or the little icons at the bottom. And that's it. So why is it on the Hotness? Well, it's because, like I said, it's a Kickstarter that is being well received, and more clicks, obviously, as you know, on Board Game Geek is what shoots things up the Hotness in the first place. It's a beautiful looking game. I think the gameplay is relatively straightforward, but people are liking it for what it is. I think there was a lot of concern that this was going to be another Kickstarter when it was kind of funding, that the art was beautiful, but was the gameplay going to be a little bit lacking? And so far, people are relatively happy with it. It's got a 7.8 rating of almost 700 ratings, so that's really pretty good. Let's not go into the whole Kickstarter inflation thing. I don't. Board Game Geek is Board Game Geek. Whatever. Is it the deepest game you're going to play? No. I think what people have just said is it's beautiful to look at. It's beautiful to have that idea of creation, of being able to create something yourself, and they're just enjoying it. And that's the bottom line. You are enjoying the game you are playing. So, there we go. That is your Monday morning hype/hotness quarterback roundup. Now, that name is a bit of a jumble. So if you have a better idea out there for me, let me know in the comment section below. You know, the MMHQB kind of works-ish. I don't know. I like it. It's probably going to go on like an every 2-week cycle because I feel like that's when things really start to refresh on Board Game Geek. Anyway, obviously there were some things on the Hotness that I didn't cover, that I didn't mention, that I had covered last week. Things like Lost Ruins of Arnak, Dune Imperium, Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion. Those are ones that are on there, and there are ones that are going to be carryover. So I'm going to try to avoid duplicating those, as I mentioned in the beginning, hopefully, just because unless there's something new to tell you, you've already heard about it. So there we go. As for videos upcoming this week, I'm hoping to also have a little bit about Zombicide, so that you, especially if you're interested in that Kickstarter campaign that's running, is this the right one for you compared to the other iterations that are out there in the first place? Should you be spending your money on this one and getting it a year and a half later? Or are you better spending it on a product that is already out that you can have potentially next week? So I'll take a look at that. Maybe a couple should you backs on some of the big ones in terms of delving into the what you should know and what you shouldn't know. And then towards the end of the week again, Kickstarter roundup of all of the, good gosh, this is going to be a long video, 17 at least Kickstarters that are launching, as well as what you need to know for the last part of February next week. As always, thanks for watching. Stay classy out there. If you like it, shoot me a sub. If you don't like it, shoot me a sub. Sorry. It is what it is. Anyway, the view and anything that you like is what's most important. Have fun playing games, and hopefully your week goes well. See you around.